9 o'clock on your Tuesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you here on The Game as we make our way through the week. It's Wofford week. We'll touch on Wofford a little bit as the week goes along, but not a whole lot to dive into with that matchup because, again, that's a game that Carolina should be able to, to handle pretty easily. Kind of putting the bow on what we saw this past weekend against Missouri, which again, and I'll reiterate what I said yesterday, one of probably the best game that I've seen in my 2 years covering this team. And obviously the people that have been around this program a lot longer than I have are even saying this is, a top 5 all-timer, or at least for what they've seen in person at Willie B.
Hold up. So you're saying Wofford's not deserving of our attention these days?
Not too much. Look, I'm not trying to disrespect the Terriers, but I'll go off of what Bill and Preston said at the end of last time. We're not the one playing the game. Here's the funny thing. People accused us of not being positive enough, leading into like the Vanderbilt game. And it's those same people that were accusing us for being too positive last week going to the Missouri game, where on paper, we all said South Carolina should have won the game multiple scores. They didn't. And it ended up being a very good and compelling game, but they still won at the end of the day. And we were all confident they were going to be able to do so.
You can't win. That's the one thing that with anyone in media, you cannot win because someone will always not be happy. But you know what? I'm glad we were positive. It feels good to be happy and positive about a team. And look, we cover them. It's our job. And look, if we feel good about them, it is what it is. But you know what? This week, they should destroy Wofford. And they're coming off, I think, like you said, man, I think it probably is like a top 5 game in recent memory for South Carolina. And these are games that they've lost in the past where they've had these leads. I always think back, I said it yesterday, it's a 2014 Missouri where they have the 2-score lead. College game day came to town. The buzz is there. Top 25 matchup, and South Carolina blew that game and didn't come back. And they lost by 1. And the same situation nearly happened on Saturday when you're down 22-21, and it's like, oh, man, like here we go again. It's deja vu all over again. It's happened twice this year with LSU and Alabama, but they found a way to persevere. And I think leaves the mark that, anyone that had questions about this team going into, or still by this point in the year, the getting over the hump with Missouri was probably the final thing they needed to see to feel confident about the rest of the season.
Well, I think there's a spark when you go back to that A&M game where, again, they finally ended that 9-game losing streak against ranked opponents. It just feels like a switch really flipped at that moment in time. And again, they're currently on a 4-game winning streak, should be at 5 this weekend, and then you have an opportunity to get 6 in a row coming up next weekend against Clemson, which the 5-game winning streak, if you can beat Wofford this weekend, will be the longest since 2013. Where they did end that season on a 6-game winning streak.
And that was a pretty good year, if I'm not mistaken.
It was a pretty good year. That was in the midst of that run. That was actually the end of that run.
11 straight
10-win seasons.
Yeah, that was insane. 3 straight 11-win years. It's crazy. I mean, look, we're not in that territory just yet. Look, South Carolina is only 7-3 right now. However, they're getting kind of close here. They're going to be 8-3 after this week, most likely, and then anything can happen next week out in Clemson. Which, by the way, that game being a day game really benefits South Carolina. And then you go to a bowl game, you win that, it's 10 wins, and we're talking about, even if they don't make the playoff, that's a great season right there for South Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we dive into all the specifics on that, of course, it is 9 a.m., which means, Terry, we got to get things kicked off, as always, with our usual 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up.
Time to get hyped.
Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm.
Sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
It is time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803 all nines. You mentioned that Clemson game coming up next weekend. It is going to be a 12 noon kick broadcast on ESPN. Of course, we'll have the game for you here on 107.5 The Game. And like you said, I've heard Preston bring this up. In terms of road games, playing a nooner is probably the best. Obviously, the atmosphere is not going to be as raucous for the for the home fans there. You don't have to sit around the hotel all day waiting around and watching other games. You wake up, you play football, and then you get on with the rest of your day. Where, again, last time Carolina played a noon game at Clemson, they won.
Exactly. And I think, Look, I know people out there are frustrated that this isn't a night game, and you see a game like Florida State being at 7:30, and you're like, what? Like, Florida State is a dumpster fire, and well, Florida had a good game last week, but
That game shouldn't be on television.
that game should be on the CW. And I saw a joke yesterday saying, because ACC to CW,
yeah.
and they're like, oh, I'm surprised this game's not on
Is it
CW.
at the Swamp or is it in Doak Campbell?
It's at Doak Campbell.
Okay, so it actually
should
have actually been on CW.
And people were saying the same thing for South Carolina Clemson. But you know what? I don't know. I've seen the theories that it's because someone didn't agree to playing this game on Fridays now and stuff.
That's what I remember from the summertime, because Georgia and Georgia Tech are playing on Black Friday. And originally it was thought, I believe, that Clemson and South Carolina might have gotten that spot presented to them first. Clemson didn't want to do it because it was a home game for them. So potentially maybe next year, Carolina may want to opt into doing that at home.
I think it's a good idea. I like the Friday slate because it's not like no teams play on Friday. It's like a good group of games are on Fridays.
And now that the SEC has, or excuse me, ESPN has the exclusive rights to the SEC, normally the Egg Bowl gets played on Thanksgiving.
That's right.
It seems like they're kind of moving away from Thanksgiving games. I think Tulane and Memphis are playing on
I'll double check
Thanksgiving. But I think that's the only college game this year.
There's one other game, I think, but it's like a totally
you're
random
competing
game.
with the NFL. But essentially what they're doing now, because I think Missouri and Arkansas are still playing on Black Friday,
Which
as they always do.
I always like that.
And then you'll have Georgia and Georgia Tech on Friday night. So you essentially have 2 straight days where your prime time slots are filled with SEC competition. And again, that starts on Saturday as well with South Carolina and Clemson at noon.
Yeah, and look, that's a whole discussion we can have someday about whether or not South Carolina should play on Fridays or not, like for that game specifically. Like, I think it's a good idea. I understand why Clemson wouldn't want to do it because logistically it's like you want everyone to get to the game and stuff, but people will still come regardless of the day. Getting back to the main topic, though, Saturday, that's noon. That couldn't have worked out better for South Carolina. 2 years ago, we saw what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Clemson can have a good and raucous environment. Any place can, certainly at night. So taking that element away a little bit, especially coming off of a holiday where you're going to have, maybe not as early of an arriving of a crowd or whatever, I think that plays into South Carolina's favor. And, again, if you can get that game and win it early, then that makes the rest of the day that much more enjoyable, right?
Exactly. And look, for the players and coaches, it's like they always say, like, they'd rather play at like 10 a.m. or 9 a.m., like first thing in the morning. Just get this game going. You don't have to wait around all day, and you don't have to, like, hey, feed off the early crowd because it's not going to be that great. And South Carolina's played pretty good on the road during the day this season.
Selfishly, and I was kind of hoping this game is going to get played at noon because I don't want to have to be distracted by anything when Texas and A&M play that night for what is right now, assuming everything goes well this weekend for both teams, is going to be first spot in Atlanta.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's it stinks. I think South Carolina Clemson is definitely going to get overshadowed by this matchup because of the magnitude of it. And I've seen people saying that game day should be coming to Clemson and stuff next week.
No,
it's not going to. Barring any, and I think even with a loss this weekend for A&M or something, I still think game day is going there. But yeah, it's going to be a really. We've talked about this game since August. Like Texas A&M, Kyle Field. So much is going to be on the line. Even if it wasn't, you knew it was still going to be for some sort of playoff spot or something, and that's totally what it is going to be next week, and it should be a lot of fun. But first, Texas needs to get back past Kentucky, and A&M's got to go to Auburn. And I know Auburn's awful this year, but you never know what can happen, man. It's a weird, wacky season.
By the way, back in the summertime, I picked A&M to win this game. I didn't know anything about how good they were going to be. I certainly didn't expect them to be this good, but having it at home,
they can do it
with the 13 years of hatred being built up of not playing this rivalry. I don't know, man. I got A&M.
It can happen. I think A&M's going to win this game.
And, Texas, they got by Arkansas this past weekend, especially considering the fact that Arkansas is so terrible against the pass. They didn't light it up.
No.
Like we thought they were going to. It was kind of a sleepy game. I don't know if that's kind of a look-ahead deal or whatever it may be, but, Texas, and again, lost to Georgia earlier on the season, has shown vulnerabilities this year that, again, we saw A&M, be a team that was physical to some degree against South Carolina. Carolina ended up being a more physical team, but they can punch you around. They can shove you around a little bit.
No, definitely. I don't know. I think A&M probably wins that game. And look, if you're South Carolina watching it, you need A&M to win. That would be, whatever hope you have for moving forward, you need A&M to win. So with Kyle Field and stuff, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the help that you need, because Carolina still has a small shot at making the college football playoff, which the latest rankings come out tonight, and there's certainly a good opportunity for Carolina to move up a few spots given what happened this weekend, not only with Carolina beating Missouri, but some other teams ahead of them losing. We'll dive into that coming up next on where exactly Carolina needs to be for you to still think they have a shot, as well as look at what the projections are for their bowl game. Are coming up next. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Feltry along with you on your Tuesday morning here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher along with you on your Tuesday here on the game. Reminder, as always on Tuesday, Shane Beamer's weekly press conference coming up at 1 o'clock as he kind of puts the finishing thoughts on what happened against Missouri this past weekend. And he's going to tell us, probably in his little opening riff, 3-4 minutes, about how great of a team Wofford is. And we're all going to sit here and just kind of nod and say, okay, sure, as he tells us about whatever. And I haven't really dove into them too much this week, that they have this player that could go to the NFL, or, you know, they gave this team trouble. And he's going to sell us on the idea that Wofford's going to be a problem this weekend, which they're not. Carolina should win that game very handily and get a lot of guys in off the bench. Senior day, you know, let mama take a picture of you and take a video of you playing if you haven't played this year. That's what this game is. And I know Coach Beamer is going to try and sell us on it that it's not, but we all know what the deal is.
No, exactly. Like, look, it's Wofford. Like, no disrespect, but if you have any trouble with an FCS opponent this week, you got problems. Like,
Yeah.
And South Carolina, unfortunately, has been playing the best football right now, so they should be fine.
And I know people's quick rebuttal to that. Hey, remember what happened against Old Dominion? This is a much different team than the one that played Old Dominion.
First off, Old Dominion is an FBS team.
That is an FBS team.
Second off, don't mess with Group of 5 teams. That's a totally different animal. It's like even Akron's an FBS team. But you know what? It's like, what are the odds South Carolina would ever lose to?
Which, by the way,
Citadel.
If they played Old Dominion this weekend, I think they'd beat them by no less than 4 touchdowns. This is a much different team, a much more gelled, a team that has figured itself out since week number 1.
Exactly. Like, and again, it's the same thing for Clemson. Like, they play Citadel this week, so neither team should have issues, and we'll see.
Well, yeah, actually, interesting thing there, because Citadel's going to run the option, so you're going to get maybe a little bit more of a banged up Clemson team having to go up against triple option this weekend.
Yeah, but hey, that's also something South Carolina runs a little bit, so it'll get them ready a little bit for that. But for South Carolina, though, sticking on them, look, it's a nice weekend to play your backups. Hopefully no one gets hurt, and it's senior day, so you get to hopefully play a lot of guys like I don't know, that we haven't seen much of.
Try and get Luke Doty in the end zone one more time.
I would like to see him in there.
Things like that. Just let everybody have a good curtain call here at Willie B before going on to Clemson next weekend. Which again, that's what senior day is supposed to be. No,
most definitely. It'll be very interesting. I think I'd like to see Doty get in the end zone. I'd like to see some of these other guys get in. But, the task at hand is to still win the game. So take care of business and don't let them back in the game.
So tonight we'll get the 3rd edition of the 2024 CFP rankings. And, of course, Carolina clocked in last week at number 21, one spot behind Clemson, funny enough, at number 20. And we had quite a bit of losses ahead of them in the teens this past weekend, with Louisville losing to Stanford, Washington State losing to New Mexico, and then Kansas State losing to Arizona State, which, shout out to Arizona State, a very sneaky 8-2 Arizona State team that's going to play BYU this weekend.
Exactly, and they have a shot to potentially run the table and win the Big 12. So
Big 12 is wild, man. Big 12 is absolutely nuts.
And BYU lost to Kansas, so you know they're going to drop.
So here's my question to you, because we've been toying with this idea the past couple weeks. They're like, well, Carolina's chances of making the playoff aren't great, but they're still there. There's still a realistic possibility that they could, if chaos continues to unfold, as again, 3 teams ahead of them in the teens lost this weekend, they could maybe make a case to being in as a 9-3 team, assuming that they went out. Where do they need to be in tonight's ranking? 17 was kind of my cutoff point, because I think if you're 18 or 19, that's still a long way to jump in 2 weeks. And look, playing Wofford this weekend is not going to do anything to warrant you jumping. It's going to take other teams ahead of you losing to try and boost that a little bit. But for Carolina, you beat another ranked team this past weekend against Missouri. You had the benefit of 3 teams ahead of you in the teens losing. If they can get to 17, looking ahead at the last couple weeks of the regular season and then conference championship games, because here's the thing. As of right now, Miami and SMU are set to play for the ACC championship game. A loser of that is not going to get in, and loser of that probably drops a little bit too, which right now SMU is sitting at 14. So let's just say, all right, things continue to go the way they go. SMU lose the ACC championship game. That's potential jump ahead of them. If Texas A&M loses to Texas at the end of the regular season, which, again, I think Texas is going to, A&M is going to win that game, but let's say they don't, they lose that game, then Carolina, having the win over A&M, should be able to jump in. You can make a case, and then, of course, a lot of other things could potentially happen as well. You can make a case that Carolina is right there on the edge of playoff consideration. You would be in a position where you'd make the committee say no to you, if that makes sense.
You need a lot to happen, but I think that's the ultimate goal right now is to make the committee's job as tough as possible. Give them no rhyme or reason to feel like, hey, we need to leave South Carolina out. And look, you still have a top 15 game coming up next week against Clemson.
That's right, another ranked opponent.
Yeah, so like Clemson, they should be ranked. I think they're going to be ranked inside the top 15 by the time we get to that game. And look, if Clemson's got a chance to be in the ACC championship without question if Miami loses or whatever, then I feel like South Carolina, you're looking at like, hey, you go into Death Valley, you beat another ranked team, and then Clemson goes on to maybe win the ACC title or whatever. It looks like a really, really good win for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, I don't have the highest hopes that Clemson's going to be able to make the ACC championship game at this point in time. But you bring up a good point. Assuming things continue as they are, where Clemson may be 16 and South Carolina 17 or 18, and these two teams are right there with each other, you have an opportunity to beat another ranked team that is probably going to be ahead of you coming up next weekend. That's another boost to your resume as well. So again, the chances are not the highest. I think they're around 9-10% at this point in time. But Carolina is, if you can end the season on a 6-game winning streak at the end of the regular season with wins over A&M, with wins over Missouri, with a win over Clemson, with a win over a Vanderbilt team that is very good as well. You'd make a case at playing some of the best football in the back half of the season out of anybody in the country. And again, you would make the committee tell you no.
Exactly. And like, look, worst case, you don't make the playoff, and it's a tough situation. But you know what? You get maybe the 10 wins because you go to a great bowl game regardless. So hey, look, it is what it is if they don't make it, but you know what? It's still a good season regardless.
Speaking of bowl games, again, this is all on the assumption that Carolina would not be able to make the college football playoff. Looking at the latest bowl projections from over the weekend, and look, there's a lot of sites to do this. I kind of stick to the main 3 or 4 here. ESPN is in consensus that Carolina will be in the ReliaQuest Bowl, taking on either Illinois or Iowa from the Big Ten. Same thing with Athlon Sports, ReliaQuest Bowl versus Iowa. Same thing with the Action Network and Brett McMurphy, ReliaQuest Bowl versus Iowa. The one that differentiated was the CBS, which actually had them in the Gator Bowl once again taking on Louisville. So it seems like right now you're going somewhere in Florida, likely taking on a Big Ten team, but maybe an ACC team.
Yeah, I think without rhyme or reason, you're probably going to Florida. Like, it just makes sense. I don't think Music City is in the question, considering, one, they've never been there, and I mean, look, I don't think it really matters, but they were just in Nashville. So,
yeah.
I think Florida makes most sense. I've seen the Citrus Bowl be like an option people want. I think there's too many good SEC teams to where, I think they're going to take the highest ranked SEC team. If that's South Carolina, great. But if not, ReliaQuest Bowl.
Where Tennessee falls is the biggest difference to me. And again, if this is assuming if Carolina's not in the playoff. If Tennessee makes the playoff, then things continue the way they are and Carolina wins out. Carolina probably goes to the Citrus Bowl. If Tennessee misses the playoffs, likely is the highest non-SEC team, they would probably go to the Citrus Bowl. That's kind of how I see it shaking out.
And definitely because, like Tennessee, they're kind of in a weird situation here where they have to, they still have to beat Vanderbilt. So they
do, which isn't going to be easy. And what the playoff committee says tonight is going to set the tone for everything.
I think so. That's going to tell us a lot. But look, South Carolina, I think regardless, is going to be in a good situation to where, look, even if they lose to Clemson, I still think they're going to be in Florida for a bowl game, and they deserve to be. I mean, they should be not having to travel across the country for a bowl game.
Yeah. Do you have a preferred Florida destination, Tampa, Orlando, or Jacksonville?
Not Jacksonville.
Not Jacksonville.
Not Jacksonville. I went to the game 2 years ago. I've heard the horror stories about the media, handling there and stuff. It's just not great. So I would prefer one of the other two.
That would be, I guess Jacksonville would be the shortest drive.
It would be, because Jacksonville's about 4.5, 5 hours from here.
Yeah,
and then
it's pretty easy.
Yeah. I mean, Orlando's about 6 to 7, and then Tampa's about 7 to 8. So, I mean, look, Florida just sounds nice. The weather's going to be good.
Yeah.
So it'll be after Christmas, too. So
that's the funny thing about the Gator Bowl. I believe it's actually on either January 2nd or January 3rd. I'll have to double check that because the ReliaQuest and the Citrus Bowl would be New Year's Eve games, I believe, which would lead into the playoff quarterfinals. And then the Gator Bowl would actually be after New Year's Day, I think on that Thursday or Friday, 2nd or 3rd. I can't remember exactly.
Interesting.
So my mark of quality of bowl game, and this is even before we've had New Year's Six and the playoff and all that kind of stuff, how late is your bowl game? Because if you're playing December 26th or December 27th, you're probably not in all that great of a bowl game. You're in Shreveport or Birmingham or something like that. But if you're on New Year's Eve, New Year's Day or something around that,
people will be watching.
People will be watching because, again, we pay attention to bowl games, as you're going through the middle of December and stuff like that. But you don't really start locking in on them until you get around December 30th, 31st, January 1st, because that's when you get the better value, the better teams and the better bowl games overall.
No, most definitely. And here's the nice thing. The Citrus Bowl on the 31st is at, by the way, Ole Miss is the CBS projection right now at 3 p.m. Illinois, Ole Miss. I think South Carolina playing a Big Ten team, by the way.
That would have Ole Miss out of the playoff then. That's interesting.
That is interesting. Look, things still need to happen. Hey, who's to say the Egg Bowl can't go to Mississippi State in Levy's first year?
If Mississippi State beats Ole Miss at the Egg Bowl this year, oh man, I can't. That shouldn't happen. I'll just say that.
It shouldn't happen, but it's a weird year.
It is.
And then the ReliaQuest Bowl's at noon on the 31st. So look, either way, people are going to be watching because it's on national television. It's the Big Ten versus SEC. Regardless of where South Carolina goes, I think you're going to get a good crowd and you're going to get a good showing for a team that is, even if they don't make the playoff, they are going to probably be the hungriest team out there still.
For sure.
And would it shock you if the bunch of the guys who could sit out that game ended up actually just playing?
I think some could. I mean, look, Kennard, guys like that, Eamon Wardy probably, they'd sit out because they're probably going to go pretty high in the draft. I get it, but I don't know. TJ Sanders, guys like that may want to play one more game for South Carolina.
It wouldn't shock me if they play.
But we're not trying to put the cart before the horse. We'll get there when we get there. But tonight's playoff rankings will tell us a lot about South Carolina's potential of the playoff and what the future bowl game could end up being. So we'll dive into plenty of that tomorrow as well. It is Tuesday, though. It's time for NFL Top 5, Bottom 5. That is coming up next here on the Extra Point. Tyler and Jack on the game.
Hey, that's a hell of a job, man. It's a hell of a job. I'm going to go back to what I said last night. Man, when you have talent, talented football players, and they are made of the right kind of stuff. They are made of the right kind of stuff, and those guys come together. You have a collective willpower that you can make the game any way you want it to go. You can do that. That's exactly what you guys did. You came out after a rough game last week. We found a way to win, and we weren't having it today, man. You guys willed that game the way you wanted it, and we have that ability. Remember that. Remember that. That gets us to 9.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Points. Howard and Jack along with you on your Tuesday. I would run through a wall for Dan Campbell. He gets me hyped every single time. That was his post-game speech in the locker room after a beatdown of the Jaguars 52-6 as we get into our NFL top 5, bottom 5, starting off as always with our Who Did the Heavy Lifting segment brought to you by our friends over at TEC Equipment Rentals. I have my TEC Equipment Rentals hat on today. None other than Jared Goff. Because how do you respond after throwing 5 interceptions the week before in a narrow victory over Houston? You go 24 of 29, 412 yards and 4 touchdowns, no interceptions.
Oh, man, just unbelievable. We say every week with the Lions, what a trade to get Jared Goff. Like, he has been outstanding for them.
In 4 out of the last 5 games, he's completing over 80% of his passes.
This team is really, really dang good.
Dude is making a legitimate case for being the league MVP right now.
Hey, he's got the best team in football right now, and that's my number one this week. The Detroit Lions. The Chiefs are no longer at the top, and the Lions, man, they're scary good. I think they should be the favorite to win the Super Bowl at this point.
It is terrifying, I think, to other teams in the league when one team is just drawing up plays in the dirt every single week and just having fun. Because we're throwing passes to tackles, we're doing reverse, we're doing double passes. Like, they're just throwing whatever they want out there because they know they're that darn good. And when you can look, Jacksonville's a bad team. They're going to be my bottom 5 here coming up in a couple minutes. No team in the NFL should get beat by 46 points. I don't care how bad they are. By the way, this is their second 50-burger of the season. They put it 52 on the Titans the other week. Like, God, they're just so good in all aspects of the game.
And they had 200-plus yard receivers. Like, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 11 catches for 161 and 2 touchdowns. And then Jameson Williams, 4 catches for 124 and a touchdown. That's crazy, man. They are seriously such a good team, top to bottom.
They're going to be hard to beat, for anybody this year. And again, they're my number 1 team as well. Number 2, look, you beat the top dog. You go ahead of the top dog. Buffalo over Kansas City, handing them their first loss of the season. They come in at number 2 for me. But Terry and I talked about this, or I've talked about this all season long with the Ravens. That's great. Do it in January. Because the Bills have owned this in the regular season for the most part. They just can't get past them in the playoffs, which, again, Buffalo fans like yourself, very excited about the win on Sunday, but it's like, okay, now do it again later on in the season when it really matters.
And you know they're going to see them again in the playoffs. So, number 1, first off, I agree with you. Bills are my number 2 as well. You beat the top dog. You deserve to be number 2, or ahead of them at least. And, look, this is a good football team that the Bills beat on Sunday. And, look, someone had to beat them at some point. But, look, the Bills, I think it was one of their better games of the year. Josh Allen looked really solid outside the 1 interception he had. I thought he ran the ball really well on that 4th and 2 play for the touchdown to go ahead and put the game out of reach. I mean, look, this team is having fun, and they're getting hot at the right time, and it felt like a playoff game on Sunday, but you're right. Go out there and do it in January, and we can actually start talking about, hey, like, they're better than the Chiefs.
Now, the Bills do have 2 losses at this point in the season, but, and I'll get to this in a second, with Kansas City, can lose a couple more games. That puts the Bills in the driver's seat for that number 1 spot in the AFC, which, again, would make the run to the Super Bowl run through Buffalo.
Which would be nice, because last year they were the 2 seed, and it ran through Buffalo when Kansas City had to come there. So, look, you want that again, but We'll see what happens. Going to Arrowhead's always tough.
So Kansas City is my number 3 again. They only have one loss on the season. They're still in control of their destiny if they can continue to win. They got some real tough games coming up, though. The Chargers, the Texans, and then the Steelers with that great defense all lying ahead of them in this back half of the season. Look, Patrick Mahomes, he's been pretty subpar this year. Like, again, and you know, teams running the 2 high safeties has really kind of neutered his ability to hit the deep ball, as it has for a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL. I don't know if we all realized how much that offense was predicated on doing that until it was taken away. But I mean, he's just been kind of okay this year. Not like awful, but just okay.
Yeah, the Chiefs are my number 3 as well. And I thought the one thing that kind of stood out, and this is a big credit to the Bills, they really swarmed Mahomes well in this game. Like, they made throws tough on him. It was the first interception of the game, like 2 plays in, where he's kind of running for his life and he just tosses the ball up in the air as he's getting hit, and it goes for an interception, and then he throws the one at the end of the game there. He hasn't been great this year. The Chiefs at some point were due for a loss with the way they were playing. There was no way this is sustainable. But, you know, for them, it's allowing them to reset, and it takes the pressure off of trying to go undefeated.
Number 4 for me. It's been a while since they've been in my top 5, actually, but Philadelphia comes in as they won on Thursday Night Football this week, taking down, you know, divisional rival in the Commanders. They're tied with the Bills for 6 straight wins as of right now in the NFL. Jalen Hurts doing a really good job taking care of the ball. Saquon Barkley has ran for over 100 yards in 4 of their last 5 games. I know with the start off the year 2-2. Obviously been on a 6-game win streak. You know, we started off the year talking about the internal struggles and Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts not liking each other, and that's all kind of quieted down the more that they've won. Very talented team, obviously really good defense. They're playing their best football right now. Can that hold together in the playoffs? We'll see. But where we stand right now, 10 games into the regular season, they're looking good.
They deserve to be in the top 5, and I'll get to them in a second. Number 4 for me, Pittsburgh Steelers. They didn't play amazing this weekend, but you know what? 18-16 win is a win, and it doesn't matter how it happens. It's ugly, but you know what? They beat the Ravens. That's a good football team right there. Pittsburgh's 8-2, and I feel like that's the quietest 8-2 team that we are talking about this season.
By the way, 18-16, is that not the most Ravens Steelers score there's ever been?
Hard-nosed football.
I go back to like the Flacco Roethlisberger days. And like when those 2 teams squared off, it was going to be like 19-15, and a bunch of weird stuff was going to happen because that's just how those games ended up. And I was watching the game on Sunday, like, man, 18-16, that seems so on brand for these 2 teams.
It's just so weird.
I got Pittsburgh actually as my number 5, so we have the same 5, just in a little bit different order when it comes to 4 and 5. Defense, man. Defense. TJ Watt playing out of his mind. A lot of other, you know, key players on that defense, and that's what wins them games. Look, Russell Wilson is not Russell Wilson of old. He's not going to go out there and sling it for 350 and, you know, run for 70 yards and score 4 total touchdowns. In fact, he didn't throw any touchdowns, and they didn't score any touchdowns this past weekend. But you know what? He's 4-0. And he's been doing a good job not being careless with the football, letting the defense do what they do, and old saying, defense wins championships, man.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, TJ Watt shaving his head was a whole different beast this weekend. So, for me, number 5, I'm going with the Philadelphia Eagles. Look, I've been a little bit of a critic of the Eagles this year. I thought the Commanders were the top team in the NFC East, the team to beat by season's end. Looks like it's going to be the Eagles right now. That's a huge win to get on Thursday Night Football. 24th quarter points. Massive to get that explosion only after having 6 through 3 quarters. A lot of credit needs to be given to this team. Saquon Barkley's been a huge addition. Jalen Hurts, you'd like to see more out of him in the passing game and stuff. But you know what? Overall, I think you're satisfied with where things are with Philadelphia right now. Sirianni's doing a good enough job, and I think he's probably earning himself another year out there at Lincoln Financial.
We'll hit our NFL Bottom 5 wrap up today's edition of the Extra Point. Reminder, the craft beer card, the new craft beer card has arrived, only $59. You can save yourself about $300 on craft beer here locally. Go online to 1075thegame.com. Click on the Sweet Deals tab to purchase the brand new craft beer card. NFL Bottom 5 coming up to wrap up today's edition of the Extra Point. Tyler and Jack along with you here on your Tuesday on the game. Well, welcome back in. Is the Extra Point. Tyler and Jack Belcher along with you here on your Tuesday on the Game, making our way through the bottom 5 in the NFL as we work our way through the second half of the NFL season. And some of these teams, they're just getting really, really sad. I'll start off my number 28. By the way, I want to say the Panthers are not in my bottom 5 this week.
Same here. They deserve it.
They've won 3 games, which is better than a lot of these teams on this list.
Yay.
They were off this week, so they didn't do anything to negate the good vibes coming away from winning that game in Germany over
the Giants.
The Giants. And Bryce Young has looked decent in the last couple games that he's been back. Not great, but decent.
Future.
So I tip of the cap for temporarily escaping my bottom 5 to the Panthers.
All right, let's get it rolling. Kicking things off, number 28, the Dallas Cowboys. Oh my gosh, this team stinks. They are awful. I mean, look, 34-10 to the Texans, man. Look, I know Dak isn't out there. I know they got problems, man. But you know what? You're paying as much money as you are for all these top guys, and you claim to be America's team. They are an embarrassment to America, and that is what they are so far this season at 3-7. 0-5 at home at Jerry's World, man. How can Jerry Jones let this happen?
Well, interesting stat last night when they threw that touchdown from Cooper Rush to Keontae Turpin. That was their first touchdown at home since week 3. I couldn't believe that.
He threw for 350 last night, by the way.
Well, because, I mean, they were down.
I know, but
multiple scores.
Still,
they just had to sling it.
That's wild.
Yeah, he also had an awful interception.
They are terrible. They are so bad.
My 28, New York Giants, again, lost to the Panthers. Last time we saw them, 5 straight losses. They've benched Daniel Jones not only to second string, to third string.
He ain't coming back.
Behind Tommy DeVito and Drew Lock. And their defense is actually okay. They're second in sacks in the league, but that offense is god-awful. There's no redeeming them.
They are pathetic. They are abysmal, a joke. They're not my number 29, though. New England Patriots.
Ooh, okay.
Look, they aren't good. We know that. I just think there are teams worse than them. Look, they were competitive against the Rams this weekend, but again, it's not enough. And the Rams are fighting for a playoff spot. So
29 for me, Cleveland Browns. That win over the Ravens in Jameis's first game as starter definitely looks like the anomaly. Again, they got so much money tied up in Deshaun Watson. Nick Chubb's coming back from an injury. They just don't have it. They're a 2-win team. They're not going to get any better, and this is just kind of another lost year for the Browns.
Oh, it is. And right on cue, number 30 for me, the Cleveland Browns as well. They are just, I mean, look, they got smoked by the Saints, who the Saints just fired their coach. So not a good team. And, hey, Jameis Winston threw for almost 400 yards. But you know what? It doesn't matter. So.
And, again, they were trailing by multiple scores in that game. So even that skewed a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
What he had is, 3-4 touch interception performance the other week, which is classic Jameis Winston. 30 for me, New York Jets. And again, this isn't, my bottom 5 is not always based off of win-loss records. A lot of it has to do with what your expectations were prior to the season. And coming off the Achilles injury, Aaron Rodgers finally healthy. He's got weapons around him. Defense should be good. This team sucks. Aaron Rodgers ain't it. He looks like a 40-year-old man, still's not thrown for over 300 yards in a game. And that defense made Anthony Richardson look like Cam Newton on Sunday. That shouldn't happen.
The Jets are awful. But you know what? I'm gracious enough to leave them out of the top 5. They lose again next week. That'll change. Number 31 for me, coincidentally, playing at the same stadium, the New York Giants. They are, oh my gosh, awful. The fact that Tommy DeVito is their starter, and look, I like what was his nickname last year?
I can't remember.
Tommy.
All the
Italian
New
nicknames.
York Italian cliches that were turned into memes were pretty funny.
Oh man, and look, I'm rooting for Tommy DeVito to have some success, but you know what? It is what it is, and they're awful. They're a dumpster fire. I think everyone's getting fired at the end of the year, but hey, well, not a good team.
They will take on my number 31 team on Thanksgiving Day. Get ready. At 4:30, you get to watch Tommy DeVito take on Cooper Rush.
This is what we sign up for.
If you're trying to find a nap on Thanksgiving, that is your nap time. Because that game is going to be atrocious.
I'd rather watch a rerun of like the Thanksgiving Day parade or the Puppy Bowl or something.
But you ran through all the problems with Dallas. Again, they don't have a quarterback. Maybe you try Trey Lance. I don't know how much better that's going to be. Their stadium's literally falling apart. A big piece of metal fell from the ceiling at AT&T Stadium last night before the game, to where they almost couldn't play the game because they were afraid something else was going to fall.
Right on screen here.
Exactly.
2025 projected salary cap $273. This team's in major trouble.
It's atrocious. And lastly, quickly, 32 for me. Jacksonville, you could beat by 46 points. You deserve to be dead last. Trevor Lawrence is still out. The rumors already circulating about Doug Peterson getting fired. This team's a disaster. There's no other way. There's no two ways about it.
Kumbaya, sayonara, whatever you want to say. Adios. Doug Peterson's gone. Number 32 for me. The Jacksonville Jags, they're terrible. I mean, look, there's no two ways around it. They're awful. Mac Jones isn't really doing much. This team is atrocious, and you get beat by 46, man. I don't care who it is. It's teams like that. You don't see that happen too often in the NFL. Like, NFL teams should not be getting blown out by that many points.
No, it should not look like what we expect Carolina to do to Wofford this weekend. It should not look like
in college
the Lions paid you $2 million so they could tune themselves up.
This team is, I don't see how Doug Peterson survives it. It's over.
If you're asking me to give a compliment to the Jaguars, they play in an area with nice weather. It's about all I can say about this team.
Yeah, but their stadium and the surrounding area sucks.
They're going to get renovations. They're renovating, what is it, TIAA Bank Field now?
Hey, they have a pool in their stadium.
They do. That is pretty cool.
That is the only silver lining.
That's the best thing about the Jaguars, the pool in the upper deck. That'll do it for today's edition of the Extra Point. Coming up next, Gamecock Club Hour, presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Myself and Chris Clark hanging out, talking some SEC ball. Coming up next here on The Game.